Rachel Zegler might have just delivered the most unhinged response to one of the biggest flops in Disney history. Snow White was supposed to be a reimagining, a modern twist on a classic tale, but it ended up being a box office disaster that left Disney scrambling and Zegler caught in the center of the storm. And instead of owning any part of the failure or moving on quietly like most actors would, she's doubling down hard. What she said recently about the film, the critics, and the backlash has people seriously questioning whether she's out of touch or just doesn't care anymore. Let's be real, Snow White wasn't just a flop, it was a catastrophe. Disney reportedly poured over $300 million, 0 cents, into this thing between production, reshoots, and a massive marketing push. And what did they get in return? Practically nothing. The movie didn't even come close to breaking even, and it's now sitting in the Hall of Fame of financial disasters for the company. But what's even wilder than the numbers is the narrative Zegler is pushing now. She's not just brushing off the criticism, she's blaming politics, straight up.
Okay, for now, focus here for a minute. Don't worry, their drama will keep going on. Think a little about yourself too. An Indonesian scientist has uncovered a shocking truth about belly fat, and it has nothing to do with diet or exercise. 95% of people who tried this strange bedtime ritual lost 25 pounds or more. Some even dropped over 50, all while sleeping. No gym, no starving, just one simple step before bed. It sounds crazy, but it's backed by science. Tap the link in the description and see for yourself.
According to Rachel, Snow White never got a fair shot because of political bias. In her words, there's a silent majority that actually loves the movie, but they're too afraid to speak up. That's right. She's implying that millions of fans secretly enjoyed the film, but were somehow silenced. Her evidence? The families she personally knows. Seriously. Because the people in her circle like the movie, she believes there's an entire underground fan base being stifled. Now you might think, that's already bizarre enough, but it gets deeper. She went on to say that box office numbers shouldn't determine a movie's success at all, that it's about the story, not how many people showed up to watch it, which is interesting coming from someone who starred in a $300 million 0 cents film that audiences clearly didn't want to see. It's like saying the scoreboard doesn't matter after losing a game 12-0. At some point, results have to count for something. Then she took aim at the source material. Zegler said flat out that she was proud the movie didn't follow the Brothers Grimm tale or the 1937 Disney classic. In fact, she said they had to change it. The original backstory, the tone, the reason Snow White is even called the fairest of them all of that she believes needed to be rewritten to fit the modern woman. That was their mission from the start, according to her. And she claims that mission was a success, even if nobody showed up to watch it. The issue here isn't just the creative choices. It's how disconnected it all sounds. She talked like the film was some misunderstood masterpiece that was unfairly targeted just because it leaned into DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. That it was a victim of the right, of people who hate progress in art. But the truth is, a lot of people on all sides simply didn't like the movie. They thought it looked cheap, felt hollow, and strayed too far from what made the original a classic. It wasn't a political attack, it was just bad reception to a bad film. And let's not ignore the arrogance dripping from some of her quotes. At one point she said, "So what if we shifted away from the source material?" As if the backlash was just people being stuck in the past. She made it sound like anyone who criticized the changes just didn't get it. And when people pushed back on the DEI angle, she fired back by saying that diversity should be the priority above all in film and TV, that storytelling should come second. That's a bold claim and one that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. You can't blame an actress for defending her work, but this wasn't defending, it was a full-on offensive. She accused audiences of being biased, accused critics of pushing an agenda, and then framed the entire failure as proof that society is just too close-minded to appreciate what they created. That's not just coping, it's delusional, and it's doing her no favors in Hollywood. Right now, Zegler's career looks like it's in free fall. Studios aren't exactly lining up to give her leading roles. In fact, she's been relegated to smaller indie films with limited releases. One of her upcoming movies, with Marissa Tomei, is barely getting any budget and will only show in select theaters. Compare that to where she was just a year or two ago, and it's a steep drop. And yet she's still out here making bold declarations about the silent majority and common sense, as if the rest of the world is wrong and she's the only one who sees the truth. It's fascinating to watch, honestly. Like a public unraveling in slow motion. Most actors would lay low, regroup, maybe switch directions, but not Rachel. She's going all in, and it's making headlines for all the wrong reasons. The most ironic part is, the more she speaks, the more damage she does. Every new statement turns into a meme or a clip on social media. The backlash grows, and the narrative keeps spinning out. Disney, for its part, seems to be distancing itself as much as it can while quietly prepping to drop Snow White on Disney Plus this summer and move on. But Zegler isn't letting it go. She's still fighting, still trying to justify, still clinging to the idea that this film was misunderstood genius instead of what it really was, a massive misfire. Rachel Zegler didn't just throw her critics under the bus, she backed it up and drove over them again. Her latest rant wasn't just about defending her role in Snow White, it was a full-blown manifesto about why she believes the entire film industry should revolve around her idea of progress. She framed DEI not as an element of good storytelling, but as the ultimate goal, one that, in her words, should override tradition, source material, and even financial results. And the timing couldn't be more bizarre. Disney is already nursing the wounds from the Snow White disaster. They've got internal reports, investor frustration, and a public relations mess. But here's Zegler going full speed ahead with a speech about how the film succeeded in all the ways that actually matter. According to her, the fact that the movie bombed at the box office means absolutely nothing. She claims the real win was how much they modernized the character, reshaped the narrative, and made it relatable to today's audience, even though that audience never actually showed up. What's even more wild is how she's trying to redefine what success in cinema looks like. The story is all that matters, she said. The success of a movie should have nothing to do with its financial status. That would be fine if we were talking about a small indie film made with a handheld camera and a $10,000 0-cents Kickstarter. But Snow White was a $300 million 0-cents blockbuster, created by one of the most powerful studios on Earth, with months of marketing and a decades-old fan base. If that flops, the numbers do matter, and pretending otherwise just makes the whole thing look like one giant denial spiral. It wasn't just audiences who had issues. People in the industry raised red flags from the beginning, even before the film came out. Leaks and early footage triggered backlash. Critics, fans, and even neutral observers questioned the tone, the direction, and the cast's attitude in press tours. Zegler's dismissive comments about the original 1937 film, calling it outdated and mocking the concept of Prince Charming, sparked more anger than intrigue. She acted like she was embarrassed to be part of the Snow White legacy, and now she's shocked that the audience didn't show love in return. To make it worse, she's taking jabs at people who boycotted the film for political reasons, saying they're disgraceful and anti-art. It's one thing to disagree with the critics, but labeling parents and families who just didn't vibe with the new version as some kind of cultural enemy? That's not how you win back public favor. That's how you bury yourself deeper. And yet, Zegler keeps insisting the film was for the modern woman. But here's the thing, modern women aren't a monolith. There are millions of different experiences, beliefs, and values. You don't speak for all of them just because you changed a fairy tale and threw around words like empowerment and progress. The audience didn't reject Snow White because they hate women or diversity. They rejected it because it felt preachy, disconnected, and disingenuous. It tried too hard to be everything except what people loved about the original. Meanwhile, Disney is stuck in a weird limbo. They can't openly blame Zegler because that would spark a whole different firestorm. But behind the scenes, insiders are already saying she's unlikely to be cast in any major roles anytime soon. There are whispers about internal meetings where execs admitted that keeping her on board after the backlash was a mistake. It's not just about one movie, it's about brand damage. And right now, Zegler's name is more radioactive than helpful. It's not that people don't want fresh takes or modern storytelling. Audiences have shown over and over that they're open to change when it's done right. But when a film gets remade just to send a message, and the message is louder than the heart of the story, it doesn't work. People feel talked down to. They feel like they're being lectured instead of entertained, and that's exactly what happened here. What's shocking is how Zegler can't seem to read the room. Instead of pulling back or trying to understand where things went wrong, she's doubling down on the same talking points that alienated viewers in the first place. She even went as far as to say that diversity should be the backbone of a story, not just a part of it. In her mind, it's not a feature, it's the foundation. Which again, sounds great in theory, but not when it comes at the expense of the story itself. And then came the oddest part of her whole rant, her comments about working with Gal Gadot. She said, "It wasn't what I expected, and I'll leave it at that." That one line raised a lot of eyebrows. Was there tension on set? Did Gadot disagree with the direction of the film? We don't know. But the way Zegler phrased it sounded like she was biting her tongue to avoid throwing someone else under the bus, at least for now. None of this would be such a big deal if Zegler had just taken a step back. But her insistence on pushing the same unpopular narrative is what keeps this fire burning. It's not about DEI. It's not about politics. It's about what happens when a star can't admit that maybe, just maybe, something didn't. The fallout from Snow White isn't just a bruised ego for Rachel Zegler. It's a case study in how not to handle public perception when a project tanks. Most actors distance themselves from controversy, let the storm pass, and quietly work their way back. Zegler, instead, decided to take a flamethrower to every criticism thrown her way, positioning herself as the misunderstood hero of a failed revolution in Hollywood storytelling. She turned a bad box office result into a crusade and now finds herself more isolated than ever. Insiders say studios have cooled on Zegler in a major way. Not necessarily because of her acting, she's talented, but because of how unpredictable the optics around her have become. Nobody wants to bet $100 million, 0 cents, on a film whose lead might alienate half the potential audience in a press tour. And it's not just speculation. Zegler's next confirmed film role is in a tiny indie project with barely enough budget to market a poster. No major press circuit, no premiere gala, just a limited release and a whisper of buzz. It's a steep fall for someone who was once seen as the future of young Hollywood. She had the look, the voice, the breakout moment with West Side Story, but the public response to her interviews, especially those where she came across as dismissive of beloved material, chipped away at her image. She didn't come off like a bold reformer or a visionary. She came off like someone trying to lecture audiences while insulting their childhood favorites. It's hard to make a comeback when the general sentiment is that people are just tired of hearing from you. That's the vibe surrounding Zegler now. Every time she speaks, it feels like she's adding fuel to a fire that the studio is desperately trying to put out. Her recent claims about DEI being the only way to reach people through art sounded less like a statement of values and more like a declaration that movies should function as lectures. And that doesn't sit well with fans who just want a good story without a sermon. Disney, meanwhile, is trying to sweep the whole Snow White project under the rug. They've shifted all focus to other releases. The official social media pages barely acknowledge the film. There's no big campaign around the Disney Plus release, just a quiet drop scheduled for the end of June. No press junkets, no interviews, not even a trailer push. It's like they're hoping people forget it ever happened. Internally, the mood has shifted too. Bob Iger and the executive team are reportedly reviewing how projects like Snow White were greenlit with so little concern for fan expectations. They've been burned too many times now by high-budget films that underperform because they feel more like cultural lectures than fun experiences. There's a new emphasis on making sure future stories, no matter how diverse or modern, actually connect with viewers rather than challenge them at every step. This doesn't mean the DEI conversation is over in Hollywood. Not even close. But there's a growing understanding that it needs to be handled with more care, not pushed as the centerpiece of every story. Representation works best when it's organic, when the characters are well written and their diversity feels authentic, not when it's inserted just to make a point. Zegler, for her part, seems completely unwilling to budge. She ended her most recent statements by doubling down again, saying that she'll stand by this version of Snow White forever, and that people just weren't ready for it. That line in particular has become a meme online. Critics joke that it's the Hollywood version of saying, "You just don't get my art." It's the kind of response that doesn't inspire respect, it invites mockery. What's most frustrating to many people is that there was real potential in a modern Snow White. Audiences weren't against a fresh take. They were against a film that seemed more interested in proving a point than telling a story. The messaging was louder than the magic, and the end result was a movie that pleased no one. Not fans of the classic, not families looking for something charming, and not new viewers either. Had Zegler approached the fallout with humility, admitted the film missed the mark, and expressed a desire to learn from the experience, the whole narrative might have been different. But her unwillingness to show even an ounce of self-awareness has made it nearly impossible for people to move on or root for her comeback. The industry moves fast. A year from now, there'll be a dozen new faces trying to claim the spotlight, and unless something drastic changes, Zegler might find herself remembered less for her talent and more for the moment she went to war with her own audience. Hollywood has always forgiven failure, but arrogance, especially in the face of overwhelming feedback, is much harder to overlook. As Snow White prepares for its final breath on streaming, it's clear that the legacy of this film won't be about its cast, its visuals, or even its controversial updates. It'll be remembered as the cautionary tale of how a studio misread its audience, how an actress misread the room, and how a fairy tale lost its magic trying to become a manifesto.